Hey, how's it going, everybody? ExpatStacker coming to you with a digital currency video, and I think this is going to be a digital currency video like you've never seen before. I read the newspaper every day, especially financial news. I read global news, American news, and Korean news mostly. And this is one of the articles that I came across today, which was very interesting. Normally, articles are just updates. You know, they just give updates, more current information about what's going on with a particular company or industry or whatever. But this is something that I've never thought of before, and I thought was very interesting. So let's just jump right into it. This is not that long. It's titled Seoul Moves Bringing Security Token into Legitimate Investment Contract Framework. So just a little bit of background information here, because every country is dealing with cryptocurrencies a bit differently. Basically, in Korea, there are a number of different crypto exchanges and companies that are connected to cryptocurrencies. More recently, a bunch of the exchanges have chosen to either delist some of the most fringe, risky altcoins or attach warnings to them. But the big ones, you know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and so on, those are just pretty much treated, I guess, how they are in the United States. So with that in mind, we should also keep in mind that the Financial Services Commission here is trying to think about a regulatory framework of how to deal with cryptocurrencies to protect investors and also to rein in some of the craziness that goes on with it, I guess. As well as the fact that the Bank of Korea is considering and testing how to do a central bank-backed digital currency, which does use blockchain. So with that context in mind, let's read this short article, and then I'm going to discuss. So South Korea is studying to bring security tokens with underlying tradable assets of stocks, debts, or real estate into the financial mainstream in hopes to establish some order in the unregulated crypto realm. The country's top policy-making Financial Services Commission, FSC, currently is examining measures to legalize security tokens under the Capital Markets Act, according to sources from financial authorities. The commission reportedly is in process of defining security tokens with a plan to categorize the digital securities under investment contract term where returns are bound by agreement. Security token is a type of cryptocurrency based on blockchain technology, but unlike usual digital coins, it can represent traditional and tangible assets like stocks, commodities, debts, and real estate. Like securities, they would pay interest and dividends. Once the security token falls under the framework of investment contract, an issuer could recruit minimum 50 investors to the contract upon approval from financial authority. For offering of 1 billion won, which is approximately 885,190 US dollars or more, security token issuer would be required to file for securities issue, and for a smaller scale, submit document disclosing public offerings. IR events must be held as in the normal case of securities offering. Any omission of the traditional process would be subject to 5 years in jail or a fine of up to 200 million won in violation of the Capital Markets Act. So they're talking about the framework here. And then it says the Seoul authority, which has so far regarded digital coins as non-existing assets or gambling means, is catching up with the global trend to contain the crypto market mayhem by bringing some of the identifiable asset-backed technology into the legal framework. But how it comes to define, quote, security in digital money could have huge ramifications on the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry. The security token typically refers to a digital coin that pays dividends or certain returns as in traditional securities. A utility token is often as payment for digital services and products. The FSC regards asset-backed digital securities as security tokens it can accept. tokens created by Casa Korea and Lucent Block have been approved under regulatory sandbox approval. Those tokens are subject to the Capital Markets Act. Bitcoin and other decentralized currencies available in the market may not fall under the category as the prices are set by the market and not bound by contract between the issuer and investors. Now, here's where I think this is interesting. Okay, so basically they're drawing a distinction between cryptocurrencies as money and tokens, which represent something in the real world. So you guys may have heard about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which a lot of them have been auctioned off recently. I just saw one about the original source code that created the internet was basically represented by a non-fungible token, and it's up for auction. It's going for, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars. Similarly, an artist can create a painting and then create a non-fungible token that represents that painting, and they can basically sell the painting, but through this digital token. So you can kind of think of it as like a pink slip for a car, or like a receipt that shows ownership of something, except it's in a digital form. And I'm not completely sure exactly what they're saying here in this article, but what I kind of understand this to mean is that the government is considering creating these security tokens which represent real things in the real world. So I started thinking about possible applications to this, and I don't know if this is what they meant, but I thought, for example, like, wouldn't that be great if it was used to, instead of taxes, to maintain public infrastructure such as roads, bridges, dams, and things like this? So basically it works almost like a municipal bond, except it's representing something in the real world. Like, for example, like I said, a dam or a bridge or whatever. And instead of the bond just representing some debt that the issuer needs, the digital token actually represents a portion of value of a piece of infrastructure, for example. So let's say there's a dam, you know, and they need to maintain the dam, and they offer, you know, 1 million tokens. So you can own 1/1,000,000th of the dam, and by you having your money invested in that and them paying you a small dividend, you know, they maintain the dam that way, instead of raising taxes for everything to maintain everything, or to, you know, pass infrastructure bills or infrastructure projects. I mean, initially that might be needed because there's bigger capital investment that's needed in building new things. But especially in terms of maintenance of these things, I think this would be a great idea. So instead of raising taxes on everybody kind of blindly and clumsily and in an opaque fashion, they just say, okay, we're creating, yeah, like I said, like 1 million tokens for the Hoover Dam or whatever, right? And let's say I want to buy 100 of them. So I own 1/100th of 1 million of the Hoover Dam, and the government pays me some dividends, like I said, just like how kind of a bond functions, but instead of it being debt related, it's related to an actual tangible asset, a real thing in the real world, like a non-fungible token. And it can be unique, created by blockchain technology for each individual piece of infrastructure or whatever it's representing in the real world. And by that, you know, we can actually lower taxes, and instead of having these increasingly grandiose infrastructure packages, or, you know, every time a new president comes in, they have this grand agenda with this big, huge centralized plan. It happens with every single administration. And they're like, this is my priority, and then this gets thrown in, and then that gets thrown in, and this gets thrown in, and that gets thrown in, and you get these big, huge Frankenstein bills that really have nothing to do with what we actually need. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that this would be the only thing, like this is the only source of funding For some things, we may need to maintain a baseline of taxation, but I think this could be a really great way to inject some capital into the society that we all share. Another thing that I think this is really great at is price discovery, because what controls the price of Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP or any other digital, cryptocurrency for that matter? I mean, it seems like it's just basically momentum and, hype and FOMO. And so that's why it's so volatile and we see these giant moves. There's probably more to that, and I'd love to hear from anybody who's more well versed in this. But what I'm saying here is that if we issue like a security token over a dam, for example, we can actually much more clearly calculate what that dam is actually worth and how much value it provides to the society. And that can more clearly represent the actual physical thing that the security token represents. And I think that's better because there's clearly an appetite for digital assets. People want a place to invest their money. They're interested in blockchain technology, and I think this can be a great application for that, because rather than it just being FOMO and momentum and these huge volatile crazy swings, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with that, but it would be great if we could also apply this great technology of blockchain in a way that's not so dangerous, for people who don't have such a large risk appetite. And the other thing is it could function a little bit more like a security, like a stock. I mean, if water becomes much more valuable, then the price of the tokens that represent the dam could go up. And if it becomes less valuable, they could go down. If there's more maintenance required, they can go up and people will invest in them. So I think that this is a really, really interesting and novel idea, and I would love it if municipal governments, provincial governments, and national governments would think about applications of blockchain technology in this sort of form and fashion, rather than just banning it because it's some kind of a competing technology that they can't control. But I think that this could offer a much more stable, meaningful, helpful asset, and it's a lot less invasive, and it's a lot more like calculated. I almost think of it as like taxes, where they need to maintain a bunch of different infrastructure, so they just raise taxes, versus this where they specifically have people investing in the things that they rely on in society. I mean, raising taxes on everybody is kind of like chopping off the leg to save the limb, whereas this is more like pinpointed laser precision surgery. So I think that this is actually a much more sophisticated and interesting method of maintaining infrastructure and public works in society. And the other thing that I think that this does is it expands access to people who want to invest. Some people don't feel comfortable taking risks by investing their money in the stock market, for example. They don't trust it. Maybe they don't like what certain corporations are doing or who they're doing business with or whatever. But this is basically a form of investing in your community or your state or your country. And I think that a lot of people would be proud to do that, happy to do that. I just think that this is a really innovative way to apply this technology for the public good, and to get through some of the red tape and bureaucracy and hurdles and inefficiency of how government operates. I mean, a lot of people say that like the government isn't the answer to the problem, it is the problem or whatever. I don't tend to believe that. I just think that we need to update the way that we do things, and this is exactly that type of thinking. If this ideally worked out, that I think it could actually do is to help to restore some of the democracy to our republic. If I'm talking about my own country of the United States, I mean, Korea is also a republic, so it could probably function the same way here. But I think a lot of people these days feel powerless because the liberal Western style democracies have kind of evolved to this point where there are people or organizations or institutions who have their fingers and their hands on the levers of power, and individual citizens, you know, the regular average person really doesn't have a say in what goes on, and they're kind of just ignored and shoved off to the side for special interest groups or whoever it may be, who can influence the politicians and kind of game the system, you know, get the laws passed in their favor and everything like that. If we, the people, because, you know, as much as we might want to blame the government for certain things, we still do live in a democracy, and it really still is a government that we influence. So this would be a way not only to, as an investment mechanism, but I think if it got widespread enough, that it could be something, a way to decentralize some of that power and to restore some of the influence that the average common citizen could have by having an actual ownership stake in your community. And so I think, you know, there's a lot of potential, and I would be really, really interested to hear what other people have to say about it, because I think it's just a new, pretty radical idea, in my opinion. You're taking a new form of technology. We haven't really figured out how it. I mean, most people probably don't even know how blockchain works, you know. But the government here is thinking about how do we use this to our advantage in order to maintain our public infrastructure, and at the same time they can, you know, think about how it's going to work with a digital currency, a central bank backed digital currency. It could be like a sort of a test run for that, as well as to rein in. I mean, there's clearly an appetite all over the world for digital assets, not just cryptocurrencies, because like I said, there's non-fungible tokens, a lot of other things. So people are clearly hungry to invest, especially in digital assets, and this can be an excellent way to do that. And all you need to do is set up the regulatory framework and have cybersecurity, and then you might even be able to lower taxes and still have excellent public works. Recently there was the hacking of the Colonial Pipeline. It supplies all the gas for the southeastern United States, basically. The interesting thing about that pipeline is that it's not owned by a single entity. It's owned by a bunch of different entities, and one of the entities that it's owned by is the NPS here in Korea, which is the National Pension Service. So in Korea they have something called a sovereign wealth fund, and that is basically an investment institution that works on behalf of the public. So they invest in all kinds of things all around the world, in stock markets and public works and everything. So I think that the United States is also facing some issues in terms of Social Security and cybersecurity and just how we do our finances and things. And it really needs overhauling and updating, and we need some outside the box thinking. So I just wanted to contribute this as one possible idea, and an interesting idea about how a new form of technology can be applied to solve problems and be a win-win-win for everyone. So you guys, let me know what you think about this idea, and appreciate you watching the video. This is ExpatStacker. Much love and respect.